to do anything against thy will, since thy will is not greater than thy power. But it would have to be greater if thou thyself wert greater than thyself. For the will and power of God are God himself. And what can take thee by surprise, since thou knowest all, and there is no sort of nature, but thou knowest it? And what more should we say about why that substance which God is cannot be corrupted? Because if this were so, it could not be God. In other words, take whatever you want. Take whatever you want and imagine it's God. Okay? If it can be corrupted, then now you know it isn't God. Because God cannot be corrupted. By very nature, he cannot be corrupted. All right? We think about this in these ridiculous challenges to the omnipotence of God, for instance. If God can do anything, can God create a rock that he cannot lift? Okay? Can God create a square circle? Okay? Well, the answer is no. He can't. Well, then the retort is, well, God can't be almighty. But that's ridiculous. The reason God cannot create a square circle, for instance, all right, is that a square circle is a lie. A square, by definition, has 4 sides. A circle, by definition, has no sides. So a square circle, by definition, is a contradiction of truth. And a contradiction of truth is what? A lie. Okay? God cannot create a square circle, not because he is not almighty, but because he is almighty. Because he is almighty, he cannot be corrupted. He cannot be induced into untruth. Right? His will is perfectly aligned with his nature. His nature is truth. Therefore, his will cannot contradict his nature, and his will cannot be corrupted into lies. Not because he's weak, but because he's almighty. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Because God is almighty, his will is never tempted into corruption. It is never tempted into lie. It never succumbs to the darkness, to the lies, to the untruth. Not because he's weak, but because he's almighty. Does that make sense? And that's what Augustine is realizing. God cannot be corrupted. And so anything that is corrupted or corruptible cannot be God. He's getting there. Philosophy's helping him. And he's getting there. So Augustine finds in the Neoplatonic books help in understanding the nature of God, not as a substance, but as being itself. He also understands all things that exist cannot be evil because they possess at least one good. What is the one good that everything that exists possesses? Existence. Existence. Existence is a good. Why is it a good? Because it comes from God. Everything that exists was created by God. God only does good. So everything that exists, no matter how corrupt, possesses at least one good thing, and that is existence. If something were entirely corrupt, it would not exist. Because God would not have made it. Because God cannot be corrupted. Evil is not a substance then, but God has made all things, because God has made all things good. Evil is not a substance that exists as a substance, as a thing, because God has made all things good. Rather, evil is a twisting away from things from God, the highest to lower things. It is a turning away from higher to lower. Just like when he said earlier, you know, what happens to us, okay, when we turn from God? We turn from a well-pleased God to an offended God. And that's what evil is. Taking what is high and making it low. Taking what God has made and twisting it away from Him, away from God. Augustine finally understands that God is no spatial substance, but a spiritual substance. He is moved by the story of the conversion of Victorinus, who was a respected rhetorician. Okay, so again, Augustine is impressed by someone that he regards as probably his intellectual equal, Victorinus, who was a very well-regarded rhetorician, who converts to Christianity. So he's met Ambrose, now he's heard of Victorinus. There are no more obstacles to Augustine's conversion, but still he hesitates, struggling between what he calls his two wills, one carnal and one spiritual. So now we're in Book 8.
Is Augustine still in Milan at this time?
Augustine's still in Milan. Yes, this is all happening in Milan.
Does he ever even think about going to Rome?
No,
No.
he doesn't go back to Rome. He doesn't go back to Rome. From Milan, after his conversion takes place in Milan, and after that he goes back to Africa.
Well, he's apparently trying to become a Catholic, but he's problems. Okay, why doesn't he go to like a Catholic, a bishop or a cardinal, call upon? Is there any reflection on why he doesn't do that, or he just doesn't do it?
Why he doesn't go to a bishop?
Catholic.
Well, he does. He goes to Ambrose.
But I meant, like to go to Rome or talk to someone there about his, accepting, being able to accept the Catholic faith, because he sounds like quite a bit of a narcissist, and he's still eat up with himself, and he's unable. Well, excuse me, I'm taking up too much of your time.
No, it's all right.
But I just, his failure to really concentrate on the Catholic faith and do more about it than whatever he should have had the Baltimore.
Well, that was a few years after, just a couple. That was a couple of years after Augustine, the Baltimore Catechism. But he doesn't need the Baltimore Catechism. He has Ambrose in Milan. He has Ambrose in Milan, and now he's a catechumen. But you got to remember too that he also needs to, like everybody else, he has to pay his rent or mortgage. He has to feed himself. He has a job. He has a job in Milan, and this is his work. So he's working all of these things out while at the same time that he's working. But to answer your question about a bishop, he does go to a bishop. He and Ambrose are in regular communication now. Okay, and they're regularly talking about the faith now at this point. And he's a catechumen, so he's actively studying the Catholic faith now. Okay, but he's also studying, and again, Augustine is a man of immense intellect, so he's not, studying in the same way that, I would study the Catholic faith, which is, through an RCIA class and, get a few books and things like that. That's not going to satisfy Augustine. He's going to go at it hardcore, and he is. And he's beating all of these ideas in his mind with, philosophy and with the catechism and conversations with Ambrose and all of this. And with his experiences, with Victorinus and others as well. So this is all coming to a point. It's all coming to a head now, and it's happening rather fast. Remember for decades, he rejected the gospel, and he rejected Christianity. He rejected his mother's faith. He was lost in Manichaeism for 10 or 12 years, something like that, and had a mistress for a dozen years, and then a second mistress after that for a while. And then all of a sudden he moves to Milan, he meets Ambrose, and within a couple of years he's baptized a Catholic. So it happens rather rapidly. But it's at a point where his heart needed to be at the right place. His heart and his mind and his will, and his body too, to a certain extent, all had to be in the same place. But eventually it did happen. In chapter 8, book 8, chapter 11, he talks about facing temptation. He hears the voice of temptation. Let's see, where do I want to start now? Thus I was sick and tormented, reproaching myself more bitterly than ever, rolling and writhing in my chain till it should be utterly broken. So he's struggling with himself. He's struggling with his temptations. But now I held but slightly, but still was held. And thou, O Lord, didst press upon me in my inmost heart with a severe mercy, redoubling the lashes of fear and shame, lest I should again give way, and that same slender remaining tie not be broken off, but recover strength and enchain me yet more securely. So he's still tied to his former self. He's still tied to his corporeal self, his bodily will, the two wills he talks about, carnal and spiritual. Even if it's just by a very thread, he's still tied to it. I kept saying to myself, see, let it be done now, let it be done now. Let me break from this now. And as I said this, I all but came to a firm decision. I all but did it, yet I did not quite. God, this could have been written yesterday again. I all but did it, yet I did not quite. Still, I did not fall back to my old condition, but stood aside for a moment and drew breath. And I tried again, and lacked only a very little reaching the resolve, and then somewhat less, and then all but touched and grasped it. Yet I still did not quite reach or touch or grasp the goal, because I hesitated to die to death and to live to life. And the worst way to which I was habituated was a stronger in me than the better, which I had not tried. And up to the very moment in which I was to become another man, the nearer the moment approached, the greater horror did it strike in me. But it did not strike me back, nor turn me aside, but held me in suspense. It was, in fact, my old mistresses, trifles of trifles and vanities of vanities, who still enthralled me. They tugged at my fleshly garments and softly whispered, are you going to part with us? And from that moment we will never be with you any more? He's hearing the voice of temptation, the voices of carnal temptation. And from that moment will not this and that be forbidden for you forever? What were they suggesting to me in those words, this or that? What is it they suggested, O my God? Let thy mercy guard the soul of thy servant from the vileness and the shame they did suggest. And now I scarcely heard them, but they were not openly showing themselves and opposing me face to face, but muttering as it were behind my back, and furtively plucking at me as I was leaving, trying to make me look back at them. You can see the struggle, you can taste it. Still they delayed me, so that I hesitated to break loose and shake myself free from them, and leap over to the place to which I was being called. For unruly habit kept saying to me, do you think you can live without them? But now it said this very faintly, for in the direction I had set my face, and yet toward which I still trembled to go, the chaste dignity of countenance appeared to me. The chaste dignity of countenance appeared to me, cheerful but not wanton, modestly alluring me to come and doubt nothing, extending her holy hands, full of a multitude of good examples to receive and embrace me. There were so many young men and maidens, a multitude of youth in every age, grave widows and ancient virgins, and countenance herself in the midst, not barren, but a fruitful mother of children, her joys, by thee, O Lord, her husband. And she smiled. You see what's going on here? The temptations are trying to lure him back. Hold on to us. You don't want to give us up forever. And then the spirit of continence, holy chastity, comes and, reveals herself to him. And she smiled on me with a challenging smile, as if to say, can you not do what these young men and maidens can? Or can any of them do it of themselves, or not rather in the Lord their God? She shows to him all of the maidens, all of the virgins, all of the people of Christ who have given their lives for Christ, and says, can you not do what they've done? Or rather what they've done with the help of the Lord their God gave me to them. Why do you stand in your own strength, and so stand not? Oh my gosh. I mean, that is conviction of the soul. Why do you stand in your own strength, and stand not? You've been there. Every one of you have been there. Every one of us has been there, where we've been resisting, trying to resist temptation, trying to resist the horrors of sin on our own. And we're saying, why do you stand in your own strength, and so stand not? We fall when we try to stand on our own strength. Cast yourself on him. Fear not, he will not flinch, and you will not fall. Cast yourself on him without fear, for he will receive and heal you. Listen to this. And I blushed violently, for I still heard the muttering of those trifles, and hung suspended. Again she seemed to speak. Stop your ears against those unclean members of yours, that they may be mortified. They tell you of delights, but not according to the law of the Lord thy God. This struggle raging in my heart was nothing but the contest of self against self. Self against self. Is that my timer?
No,
Okay.
you got about 6 minutes left.
Oh, good. All right, here we go. This is when it happens. Book 8, chapter 12. I'm sorry, this is the best stuff. Now, when deep reflection had drawn up out of the secret depths of my soul, I know I'm reading a lot, but I can't say anything better than what he does. Now when deep reflection had drawn up out of the secret depths of my soul all my misery, and had heaped it upon the sight of my heart, there arose a mighty storm, accompanied by a mighty rain of tears. That I might give way fully to my tears and lamentations, I stole away from Alypius. For it seemed to me that solitude was more appropriate for the business of weeping. He's in the garden with his friend Alypius. And all of these struggles are going on inside of his mind and his heart and his soul. And he succumbs to profound weeping, and as men are wont to do, they go off by themselves to weep. See, if this were a female saint, they'd be, where is everyone? I'm sorry, that was terrible. All right. For it seemed to me that solitude was more appropriate for the business of weeping. But that's true. You ladies, you don't want to weep alone, do you? Anyway, I know my girls don't. I went far enough away that I could not feel that even his presence was no restraint upon me. This was the way I felt at the time, and I realized it. I suppose I had said something before I started up, and he noticed that the sound of my voice was choked with weeping. And so he stayed alone. That's a good friend. Something's going on here. He's hurting. I'm going to let him be. Where we had been sitting together, greatly astonished. I flung myself down under a fig tree, how I know not, and gave free course to my tears. The streams of my eyes gushed out an acceptable sacrifice to thee. And not indeed in these words, but to this effect I cried to thee, and thou, O Lord, how long, O Lord, wilt thou be angry forever? O remember not against us our former iniquities. For I felt that I was still enthralled by them. I sent up these sorrowful cries, how long, tomorrow and tomorrow? Why not now? Why not this very hour? Make an end to my uncleanness. I was saying these things and weeping in the most bitter contrition of my heart, when suddenly I heard the voice of a boy or a girl, I know not which, coming from the neighboring house, chanting over and over again, "Pick it up, read it, pick it up, read it." Immediately I ceased weeping, and began most earnestly to think whether it was usual for children in some kind of game to sing such a song, but I could not remember ever having heard the like. And that's kind of like, it's like, oh, squirrel. But that's human nature. It's like something hits us and we get completely distracted, and we start thinking about, we go off on this tangent. So, damming the torrent of my tears, I got to my feet, for I could not but think that this was a divine command to open the Bible and read the first passage I should light upon. For I had heard how Anthony, accidentally coming into church while the gospel was being read, received the admonition as if what was read had been addressed to him, "Go and sell what you have and give it to the poor, and you shall have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me." By such an oracle he was forthwith converted to thee. Anthony of the Desert. So I quickly returned to the bench where Alypius was sitting, for there I had put down the apostles' book when I had left there, the Apostle Paul. I snatched it up, opened it, and in silence read the paragraph on which my eyes first fell. Not in rioting and drunkenness, not in chambering and wantonness, not in strife and envying, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ, and make no provision for the flesh to fulfill the lust thereof. I wanted to read no further, nor did I need to. For instantly, as the sentence ended, there was infused in my heart something like the light of full certainty, and all the gloom of doubt vanished away. In Book 9, which is the last chapter of his autobiographical section of the Confessions,
his hair.
the complete emergence of Augustine's free will in embracing God. He embraces God. Because of this, he knew that his life had to change. So he retired from his position as a teacher. Not wanting to cause any trouble for the school or for others or his students, he waited until the next period of vacation and submitted his resignation. He was also experiencing recurrent chest pains. Meanwhile, Nebridius and another friend, Veracundus, had also decided to follow Augustine and converting to Catholicism. And that's where Augustine ends his autobiography. It changed his life, and his life changed the West. Let's end with the prayers of the church. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Saint Augustine of Hippo,
Pray
pray
for
for
us.
us. Lord, bless us, protect us from all evil, and bring us to everlasting life. Amen. Thank you.